Stay tuned because the next 60 minutes.
Hi everybody, I'm
is
Janine
on
Lauschat,
the air.
and this is the
I'm Jerry
1078th edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Continuing with our effort to digitize and save some classic episodes of Motorsports Unlimited, today we're bringing you a program we shot a decade ago. It was the only program in the history of Motorsports Unlimited in which we didn't know what we were going to shoot when we pulled out from home base in the morning. It seems the material Bill had in mind, something technical about boating, became impossible when the weather turned bad. Still, Bill felt he could find something to shoot about boating if they went to one of the hot boating areas in Chicagoland. What he didn't count on was the weather getting worse and worse as the day progressed. Let's join him and motorsport girl at the time, Susan Russell, and find out what they're going to do.
Boating season. We've had beautiful summer-like weather during the past week, and it seemed appropriate. We wanted to encourage you to pull your boat out from behind the garage and start getting it ready. Only thing is, well, we'll let Bill explain. Let's join him on the Fox River in Cary, Illinois.
It is a cold, miserable, windy, chilly day, and it's April 25th. I can't believe it. Susan, am I right? April 25th? You guess so. She doesn't know either. April 25th. Thursday and Friday, the weather was so beautiful. I wanted to take my boat out yesterday. Yesterday, it was just like today, cold and rainy. Behind me is the Fox River, and we're at a place called Broken Oar. We've come here many times on Motorsports Unlimited and shown you this. This is one of the favorite boating spots in the, I guess we could say, the Chicagoland area. As I pointed out so many times, we are absolutely blessed here in the Chicago area with so many great boating facilities. We've got the Illinois River, which I've taken you to many, many times, a wonderful facility. Of course, we've got Lake Michigan. We haven't quite gotten there yet, even though we tried last year. For our regular viewers that will remember that situation. And of course, we've got the chain of lakes. Now, this is not, I got to stop saying that. It's not chain of lakes, it's chain o' lakes. Of course, we've got the chain o' lakes. And this is not really the chain of lakes, this is actually the Fox River. But if you'll remember the maps that we've shown you over the years, the Fox River is kind of part of the chain of lakes deal. I always consider it sort of the tail of the chain of lakes. You have the whole group of the chain of lakes here, which is, I don't know how many it is, 8, 9, 10 lakes, like Fox Lake and Grass Lake and Channel Lake and Bluff Lake and Petite Lake and all that. And they're sort of all grouped up here, connected by channels. And then off to the end here, we've got the tail that comes down. I call it the tail. I hope I do it affectionately, which is the Fox River, where you go through the lock. We took you through that last year, which is, I guess, about 14 or 15 miles upstream here. But I kind of consider that all part of the chain of lakes. I hope I'm forgiven for that. In any event, what we wanted to do today was to do a program to get you excited about the upcoming boating season. If you'll remember, a few weeks ago, we did one down at the Illinois River, and it was cold and raining and damp, and the river was at flood level 4 or 5 feet above normal. So I planned this show for today, figuring the weather would be just perfect by then. Well, it was perfect Thursday and Friday, and this is Sunday, and it's not perfect at all, is it, Susan?
No, but we're ready for it, Bill.
We're ready for it, and we're very tough. Now, how do we do a show about boating if we have a terrible, miserable day like this, and there's nobody, as you can see, and Chuck, if you would, as we're talking, take your shot slowly around and show the boat launching ramp over there on a nice wide shot. There is not a soul launching a boat. You'd have to be crazy to go on a boat today, right?
Yeah, you would, but there's all these people having fun in the bar, so maybe we should go in there, Bill.
No. We're gonna do a television program.
All right.
As Chuck is panning around there. Just go ahead and show the audience, Chuck, that we don't have anybody launching boats, and that was sort of our intention here today.
Right. Well, I called you this morning. I told you I don't think it's bikini weather, so.
No, it's definitely not. In fact, I got to give you credit for bravery for even being Motorsports Unlimited costume weather. It is it's cold.
You know me. I know that it's important. So.
You're a trooper. There's no doubt about it. Susan Russell is a trooper. In any
She
event,
must have been a
we were
really
sort of
good
pondering our
sport.
fate today and said,
I
"Gee,
don't
we've got
think
this all
I
set
could
up
have
to do
done
this
it
voting show."
in
As a matter of
costume.
fact, I almost
Hi,
thought I saw a
I'm
couple
May
snowflakes
Chen.
in the air.
Let's
Probably
see
my
how long
imagination, but I
Susan
tell you,
lasts
the breath
in
is so cold
costume.
today.
And if
So I said,
Bill
well, let's just
figures
run
out
up
what
and we'll
today's
stop by a couple
show
of the
is
places
going to
and-
be
and,
about.
I think we can have the same effect as always, and that is you won't see this show for at least 3 weeks. 3 weeks for sure if you're in Chicago, and then it kind of winds this way. In fact, let's just take just a moment to talk about this for a minute, okay? I've had a lot of people ask me this over the years. How long is it until the shows go on the air? Everything we shoot goes on the air in the city of Chicago and in some almost 50 suburbs surrounding Chicago within 3 weeks of shooting. After it airs on those systems in Chicago, and it's actually the Media One system out of Elmhurst, after it airs on those systems, it begins on about every month by month basis, moving from cable system to cable system to cable system as it winds its way all the way up to Milwaukee, all the way out to Aurora, all the way down to Gary, Indiana, Maryville, Indiana. The show that you are seeing, if you're in Chicago right now seeing this show will continue to air somewhere for the next 3 years. And they always air in numerical sequence. So for example, and I'm not sure what the number of this show is, but let's say it's 584, and I think that might be right. It's 584, but let's say you're in Milwaukee and you're seeing show number 427. Well, if you're seeing 427 this week, the following week you see 428, then 429, and 430, and so on and so forth. Now, there will be people that call me, and they're going to say, well, Bill, that's not true, because I saw this, or I saw that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's almost always true. Let me explain. If there's some compelling reason to take something out of sequence, we do that. For example, Milwaukee, I think, is a couple of years behind on the schedule. But if we shot a car show in Milwaukee, or we often do the snowmobile, the big snowmobile show up
Whitewater,
in
Wisconsin, we just did one.
Okay, well, if we do something like that, which is of particular interest to that area, I will interrupt the schedule and put the show in as soon as it's shot because there's local interest in it, and then it goes into its normal sequential rotation. That's the only time we go out of sequence on it.
Can you tell Bill is killing time? He still hasn't figured out what they're going to
He was
do.
watching us do water skiing shows, and he was waiting for that Holiday Park show, so I'm sure, it doesn't matter what time of year you're watching it, you'll see us doing something fun.
Something fun, exactly. That's what Motorsports Unlimited is all about, all the different ways you can have fun with motorsports. So guess what happens as we're pondering our fate, what we're going to do here today. We're setting up to do this opening shot, and in pulls a group of motorcycles.
All right.
Now, mind you, this is hardcore motorcyclists because it is cold and raining today. But not just motorcycles. 3 of them happen to be Vincents. Those of you that are motorcycle fans will know immediately why I reacted so strongly. I haven't seen a Vincent in probably 30 years.
What's a Vincent?
A Vincent is a brand of motorcycle that was at one time the fastest motorcycle in the world. As a matter of fact, it held the record at the Bonneville Salt Flats for about 37 years. I mean, these are famous motorcycles, very rare, haven't been made since the early 50s, and not just one pulled in. 3 of them. I just couldn't believe it. In this terrible weather, in this oddball occasion, we just happened to be here. So I am going to try to persuade these guys to let us take a closer look at these machines.
At this point, Bill is grasping at straws. He still doesn't know exactly what he's running to.
Like the unusual, kind of historically significant bikes. So we're going to do that. In addition to that, we also, when we were down at Morris Airport a few weeks ago, and we shot the show on Morris Airport, which you've already seen, we shot that program, we had an opportunity to interview the famous Gene Littlefield. Gene Littlefield is a famous stunt pilot, and I couldn't believe that here in a little tiny airport here right in the, I guess we could say the suburbs of Chicago, although Morris is a little further away than the suburbs, but here right close to the Chicago area, the famous Gene Littlefield actually is a fixed-based operator there, and we were already done shooting the program when I discovered this. I only had like a minute or so on the show, so I just put a little taste of it, and I promised we were going to show the interview in its entirety. So as we're going to take a moment to warm up, and I'm going to try to talk to these guys with the motorcycles, see if I can talk them into participating in some interviews, and we're going to show you these great Vincents. I hope if we can. In the meantime, while we're doing that, I want you to see the Gene Littlefield interview in its entirety because he's a terrific guy on top of everything else. Yes?
Yeah, I just want to add, was he the one who had his wife up on the wing?
The wing walker.
Oh, that is so amazing.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe the pictures of that. This lady just hanging on and everything. That's really cool.
And he's really a gentleman and everything. So I want the audience to see this. And I think probably by now you're ready to warm up a little bit.
Yes, I'm cold.
I know. And Chuck, while we're doing it, just so the audience knows what we're talking about, that kind of tuned in a little bit late, pan your shot again over to the river and show that it's cold, raining, and wet here today. And just kind of hold your shot over there on the river. And folks, don't go away because I'm going to go and talk to these guys with the motorcycles.
While Bill talks to the Vincent guys, let's return through the magic of television to Morris Airport in Morris, Illinois, and meet one of the true legends of aviation.
Well, look who else we found at the Morris Municipal Airport. This is hard to believe. When he says his name, you'll know immediately who it is, and please tell the folks who you are.
I'm Gene Littlefield.
The famous, the legendary Gene Littlefield, and actually your wife is pretty famous too.
More famous than I.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. Tell the audience what your wife does.
She's certainly braver than I am.
Braver than anybody.
Yes, she is a wing walker, retired.
Wing walker, that's from a time long ago, and believe me, it took a lot of courage. Now, I know that we're going to run out of time on this interview, folks, so don't worry about it. We're at the end of the program. I'm going to go as far as I can, show you as much as I can. What we don't get on this show, we'll get on into another show, so don't worry about it. First of all, Gene, tell us a little bit what you do down here.
Yes, I run a fixed base operation here.
Which means?
That means that I repair airplanes and maintain them, run a flight school, and an aerobatic school.
Matter of fact, you've been an aerobatic pilot for how many years?
I was in the air show business for 27 years and teaching for 28.
Tell us a little bit about the aircraft we're standing in front of. I told the girls Susan wanted to sit in it, and I told the girls this is probably the most famous aircraft of all time.
It certainly is. The airplane began life as the Taylor Cub. The design was bought by William Piper, a banker, later on, and he called it the J3, and it lived on as the Piper Cub and became the standard of training just prior to World War II and after World War II. Many people, at that time, I think probably 80% of the people were trained in a Piper Cub.
I think you're exactly right. The Piper Cub clearly is the most famous of all aircraft. Do you have any idea how many of these they made?
I really do not, and I'm sure I would guess low, but it would be thousands.
Thousands of airplanes, and I should tell the folks that this is a fabric. Is it wood and fabric, or does it have a steel tube frame?
This is a steel tube frame, and it also has a metal spar. And this one, it was a later model in 1946, but the spar was made of wood in the original airplane.
In the early airplanes, how much horsepower?
Normally, they started off at 40 horsepower, and then the standards were 65. This happens to have 100 horsepower in it, and it's a real hot rod.
That is a hot rod for the thing, but the originals were 40 horsepower?
Yes, 40 horsepower in the E2, and that was 40 horse, either Lycoming or Franklin.
Donnell, can you imagine that? 40 horsepower to fly an airplane, to take off and fly around over the city with 40 horsepower? Does that sound like a tiny amount to you?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, it really does sound like a small amount. But these were the airplanes. I can tell you, folks, out of Chuck, you probably can't see it, but these airplanes, they don't have a wheel in them. They've got a stick control. The height of simplicity.
It is.
And you still obviously use it here for something.
We sure do. We teach in this airplane.
Really?
And we use this for tail wheel transition. Since they put the tail wheel on the wrong end of modern airplanes, so to get people to the point where they can fly a correctly tired airplane, we then give them tail wheel transitions in the Cub.
Well, you can tell that Gene is probably more than 25 or 26 years old, because he speaks longingly of the tail draggers, as we used to call them. I never flew a tail dragger. Everything I had was a tricycle gear airplane. But guys like you weren't afraid of those ground loops at all.
No, we were afraid of them, and that's why we didn't do them.
not a great idea at all. So you still like the tail dragger style,
Sure
though?
Do.
Do
Yeah,
you really?
I absolutely do.
What was the advantage?
Well, the advantage is you can land much slower.
You can land slower,
Yes,
but you also can't see over the cowl.
Well, that's true, but you're not going to go far after you land, and the airplane is in critical angle when you touch down, and that's why it lands slower.
Well, you heard it from one of the very, very best in the business, Gene Littlefield.
He's quite a gentleman. Now let's return to Broken Oar on the Fox River and see if Bill was able to persuade the Vincent owners to come out of the nice, warm restaurant.
What did I tell you? Vincents. I can't believe it. I haven't seen a Vincent in 30 years. I haven't ridden a Vincent in 35 years. And here we are out at Broken Oar, and I've just found out it is in Cary, Illinois. I come out here a lot to launch my boat, and I never really knew where it was. Chuck, if you'd broaden your shot a lot, because I think we've got the place right behind us. Although I think everybody kind of knows Broken Oar, don't they?
We do.
You are.
Paul Holsworth.
Where are you from, Paul?
Palatine.
Paul, I want you to explain how on a day as miserable as this, and folks, I'm telling you, it's freezing. The water is falling on us. I hope the lens isn't picking up too much water droplets.
I think that's proof of it, right?
And unbelievably, these guys come rolling in here with not one, not two, but 3 Vincents. What are you guys doing?
This is the 52nd anniversary of the development of the Series B Rapide. The Series B was the Vincent twin made after the war, a post-war twin.
Chuck, as he's talking, if you would take your camera shot back to the engine over there on the one, and that's okay. You can go ahead and just keep chatting with me. Go ahead.
So this is the third year in a row we've had this ride. We kind of pick a day about 6 months in advance, and as soon as I pick that day, I know the weather is going to be miserable. April 26th, we picked this day back in October.
Yeah, we have kind of the same problem, by the way. We have to shoot no matter what. Go ahead.
So we have a good turnout every year. As I say, this is the third year. I think last year we had 5 Vincents. This year we're down to 3. Some of the bikes aren't running. Some of the guys got family things. But we go rain or shine.
Give us an idea of the Vincent Marquis. What is it? Where does it come from?
Vincent is an English motorcycle. It was designed by...
Which would explain why some of them aren't running. Go ahead.
Which would explain like they're not running. And it's raining, and none of them have broken down yet.
But do the lights work?
The lights work.
I'm only teasing. My British friends are going to kill me out there. I love British motorcycles. I've had BSAs and Triumphs my entire life, but we do kind of like to tease them about the reliability problems.
Well, actually, the Vincent is a pretty reliable motorcycle.
Do you know, wait a minute, do you know how many people with either Triumphs, Nortons, BSAs, and everything start their conversation when I question reliability? Well, actually, go ahead.
No, true. You know, the sidecar outfit here, it's got over 100,000 miles on it since Glenn bought it back in the early 70s.
Really?
Yeah, he's been all over the States with it, Canada, he's had overseas. The Vincent Club is a pretty good club. The Vincent motorcycle, once everything is broken down, at least once, you get the hang of it.
Explain the Vincent to the audience. Why? I'm obviously very excited about the fact that 3 Vincents have rolled in here. Maybe you would explain to the audience why there are lots of old motorcycles that don't create that kind of enthusiasm. Explain to the audience why I'm so enthused about the Vincent Marquis.
Well, I think the Vincent is unusual in that most motorcycles are developed by committee. The Vincent was developed by Phil Irving and Phil Vincent just before the Second World War. During the war, as England was at war against the Germans, they developed a motor really under the guise of making a target drone motor for airplanes for anti-aircraft practice. When the war was over, they came out with the unit construction twin. It's all alloy, 50-degree V-twin, dual carbs, out of the box. The Rapide would do 110 miles an hour. The Black Shadow would do 120. They were setting records at Bonneville at 150 miles an hour back in the early 50s.
That was with the Black Lightning, if I remember correctly.
That was the Black Lightning.
Right,
So
and we are
really
talking
fast,
about, that's what the point. It's a very fast motorcycle, and you had to live through the period to really appreciate it. It seems to me that the Vincent Black Lightning held the record at Bonneville for about 37 years or something like that.
Quite a few years, and they're still running. There's a gentleman by the name of Dave Matson out of Detroit that still runs at Bonneville. He's in a 200-mile-an-hour club. We went back out to see him in the late 80s. He did 235. Unfortunately, he fell off shifting into 4th.
Oh, that's bad.
Broke both his wrists and gave him a hell of a rash on his chin.
Yeah, that's a bad thing to do. You don't want to do that, but I am delighted to have an opportunity to introduce our audience to the Vincent Marquis. Many people would look at these, and again, Chuck, I know you're showing the audience from time to time, but once again, take a look at the machine over here, and we're going to look at each one of them individually a little closer. Many people would look at those and think they're a Harley because it's a V-twin.
A lot of guys think they're Harleys. And fact is, they used to be called HRD.
That's correct.
Howard R. Davies started a company in the 20s to run at the Isle of Man. He went out of business in the late 20s. Phil Vincent bought his company. The HRD was a really good brand name at the time. He came over to the States in the late 40s and realized that the HRD name had a lot of people confused, think it was an HD, so he changed the name to Vincent.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. The Vincent Marquis is famous for bullet-fast motorcycles and actually for quite good reliability, but they were also notorious for evil handling, or do you want to quarrel with that?
Every motorcycle I've owned has had evil handling after enough beers or a bad road.
Well, let me tell you about my BSA. It had the finest handling and the finest road manners, but go ahead, because the British, that's one thing the British do very well is road manners.
Well, the Vincent had you would recognize as a monoshock suspension.
Very peculiar design for the time.
A lot of people felt like it had a hinge in the middle.
Precisely. I didn't want to say it that way.
Once you get used to that feel, I think the faster they go, the more solid they are.
Well, it's obvious he's a fan. And once more, because I want to look at each one of these things individually, once more, your run today is something you do annually to celebrate the V-twin.
The development of the V-twin after the Second World War. It was the unveiling of the Series B Rapide.
Okay, and so this is a sort of an annual event that you guys do.
This is the 52nd year. This is our 3rd year of doing this event.
Well, I want to
Talk
congratulate you
about
guys.
luck.
And again, here's
They
guys
had
who are
no
very
idea
focused
what
on
they
our
were going to
because
shoot
these
when they
RPGs,
left in the
you take
morning,
them, use
and
them,
lo and
especially
behold,
today.
they
The
bump into a
invitation on our
motorcycle
B-52
club
ride was
celebrating the
rain or
history of
shine.
one of the world's most
You guys
famous
know?
superbikes
Well, you know, if it
from
rains,
another era.
there's no traffic.
What are the
Everybody stays
odds?
at home, which is better for a
Anyway, it
motorcycle
caught Bill
riding.
totally by
And the guys that show
surprise,
up
and
are
he
really
didn't want to
serious,
miss
and
the
I'd rather be with a bunch of guys
opportunity
that are serious
to
and a
tell
bunch
you
of
about
posers.
these historic
sounds to me
machines.
good Vincent
By the
weather.
way,
This sounds to me
is
like
Susan
the leader
Russell a
of the group,
good sport or
because, boy, is he
what?
rationalizing it today, because I bet they're really mad at him. Now, I want to thank
Now,
you.
you were glad to see us.
Oh,
You
delighted.
gotta say leader of the
And I got a
pack.
beautiful lady waiting for me. This was a good day.
See, we can have fun on a rainy day on Motorsports Unlimited. Now, don't go away, folks, because we want to take a closer look at these great bikes.
Bill must have been enthused because even though it doesn't show on television, it was raining the whole time and he was getting soaked. Now, before the skies open up, let's check out another of the great Vincents.
The Vincent, of course, as I'm sure you can probably tell, is one of my favorite marquees, mainly because it was, without question, in the early and mid-50s, the fastest motorcycle in the world. No doubt about it. First of all, you are.
Glenn Shriver,
Where are you from, Glenn?
Chicago.
Tell us about your Vincent. What is it?
It's a 51 Rapide. Bought it in 1971, had it ever since. I bought it in England when I was working over there and shipped it back, and I've been riding it ever since.
How many cc's?
1,000.
Okay, as all of the Vincents that you're celebrating here today were 1,000cc V-twins, am I correct?
Right. They also did a 500 single, but none here today.
Right. Vincent, I should say, in fact, maybe you can go out and say, what was their entire line? It wasn't just the 1,000cc V-twins.
Well, they started out in the 20s and 30s with motors they bought in, but mostly 500s, and then the first twin was invented in 36, and then after the war they specialized only in twins, and then people thought, well, you know, there was a market for the singles also, so they went back and made singles also.
Let me point out a couple things to the audience. Chuck, if you come in on the engine shot here, obviously it's a V-twin, very much like the Harley-Davidson. That's why these things are often confused with Harley-Davidsons. And it's an overhead valve engine. If you'll notice, we've got the pushrod tubes here, and these are for adjusting the valves here, 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 and here on the V-twin design. And this was actually called a high cam design. And the reason for that was they had the cams mounted relatively high in relationship to the crankshaft to keep very short pushrods for light valve train weight. And as a matter of fact, perhaps he can tell me, what kind of an RPM do you run with these motors?
Oh, it's very low actually, 3,000, 3,500, something like that.
But at full throttle?
Pretty much, yeah, 4,000. They can run up to 6+. But,
yeah, because I was thinking about the Black Lightning was a solid lifter engine, if I remember correctly.
Basically the same exact engine, just tuned and lightened, yeah.
Yeah, and it seemed to me they were running those over 7,000 RPM, which was something of a miracle in those days of 4,500 RPM V-twin Harleys.
I'd rather not blow mine up, so...
No, there aren't going to be any more of these, that's for sure. Yes, Susan?
So I see they got that extra ride over there. Is that extra seat?
What are you talking about?
Called again? This thing?
Oh, sidecar. Yes, this one is a side. If you can't see it in your shot, hopefully we'll get a cut shot of it afterwards. This is a sidecar model, very unusual. Tell us about the sidecar.
I bought it I put it on in 1980 and left for California with it, but it's a same vintage mid-50s Stibe made in Germany.
You took a vintage motorcycle all the way to California?
Oh yeah, I've been the California once. I went to Boston, the East Coast once. I've been to most states in the U.S. and most provinces in Canada.
Well, boy, you are a hardcore biker.
Well, it's fun.
It actually is fun. It's hard for people to really understand how much fun it is. One thing I want to show the audience is that the suspension we were talking about earlier, I think you can see it in this shot. Chuck, if you will notice, we have a triangulated arrangement here. The swing arm comes back. It is a triangulated affair. And if you notice right up here, we have the shocks and the springs here. Try to hold your shot in here. I'm going to try to do this without blocking it. I want you to see when the other gentleman was talking about there being like a hinge in the middle. And it really, I can tell you at the time, the handling characteristics to us were very, very peculiar, if that's probably a generous way of saying it. But let me show you. And Chuck, tell me if you can see that. Am I moving it enough to show movements like it's hinged in the middle? Yes, pretty much? Okay. I want you to see that because it actually pivots here, and you sit here right kind of over the pivot. Kind of, for the uninitiated, Unusual handling characteristics, agreed or no?
Well, I don't own anything else really, so
to you it's normal.
It's normal for me, so I don't know anything else.
Come on, have fun, Bill. Let's see you ride.
Well, one final question for you. If you are a Vincent aficionado, what is the one Vincent that everybody wants?
Well, I would think everybody's different, of course, but my favorite would be a pre-war twin. Really, they call it the snarling beast, and it was so outrageous that they kept burning up clutches, and there was no road in England straight enough and long enough to get full speed out of the thing. But that's when they started the world's fastest standard motorcycle.
It's not the Black Lightning. That's not the one you want.
It doesn't do much for me because you can't use it. You know, it's made for racing only, and
very difficult to start.
Flat out,
yes,
cranky to start and cranky to run. But it just goes crazy. You know, it's just all you have to do is hang on. You know.
Well, I want to thank you for spending a little time with us. Once again, the wind is going to blow Susan away here for a minute and turn her umbrella inside out. Chuck, take one more look at this great vintage Vincent motorcycle, and we're going to come back just as soon as Susan gets warmed up.
The weather was getting worse. You have to give everybody involved credit for participating. And by the way, they haven't given up on finding a boater yet.
I want to remind our audience that the program we are doing today is to get you revved up for the boating season. I'm telling you, I promise, the boating season is on the way, even though it doesn't seem like it today, because I really believe I saw a couple snowflakes just a few minutes ago, and I don't want Susan to know that I actually saw snowflakes in the air, but I think I did.
Care, Bill.
No, I do care, because actually it's affecting me today. I'm cold, and so are these guys that are in full coats and everything. Once again, look at this gorgeous, gorgeous Vincent. This is an immaculate example of a Vincent motorcycle. I can't believe we were so lucky to stumble on this today. And we have a fellow here that actually has a legitimate right to own one because he happens to be from England, and you are.
Tim Holcroft.
And where are you from?
Well, I'm living in Lake in the Hills, Illinois, but I'm from England originally.
What part of England?
Well, from the London area.
From the London area. He's apparently wanted over there and doesn't want to be more specifics about it, but that's quite okay. Tell us about your Vincent.
Well, I've had this bike about a year now.
What is it? What year? What model?
This is the 1950 Black Shadow. It's not quite original. The upper frame members probably a 1949. But the rest of the bike is pretty much original.
Okay, this is, again, I want the audience to understand the difference. The Rapide would have been considered more or less the normal model that everybody would buy. The Black Shadow was the performance version, and the Black Lightning was the racing version. If I don't have it right, you guys are the experts.
No,
tell me.
That's absolutely correct, yeah.
So you would have had the one, if we were comparing this to automotive terms that our audience would be most familiar with, this is the one that would have been probably the equivalent of, say, a single carburetor 409 rather than the dual quad 409. Would that be fair enough, or are you familiar with those cars at all?
That's familiar enough for me, yes.
That's familiar enough. So in other words, this was a very fast, very powerful, and as far as the normal human being buying one of these to actually use them, this was the high performance model of the Vincent line, although they did make the Black Lightning, which was a cantankerous thing to try to actually use other than for racing purposes. And if I don't have it right, please say so.
That's pretty much the case, yeah.
What do you like about it?
Everything. I owned actually a Norton Vincent in the 1970s, and I got out of motorcycling for about 20 years, and I was going through the basement and found the old manuals to the Vincent I had back then, and I kind of got on the internet to give these manuals away to somebody, and
somebody would like to have them and make use of them?
Sure, and several people kind of wrote back to me and said, well, sounds like you need to get back into this. So I'm in my second childhood with this lovely little machine.
Well, how old are you?
How old am I?
Yes.
I'm 52.
Okay, well, he's younger than I am, folks, so he's just, I don't want to hear the second childhood. I'm still in my first childhood, and I insist on staying there until they throw dirt on me, as a matter of fact.
Oh, it's great when you get into it.
It really is, and I can tell you this is now, your machine almost appears, the other bikes actually appear to be more something that people use on a regular basis. Yours almost appears to show quality. Is that by intention, or you're just a neat, fastidious guy?
I guess I'm just kind of neat. I use it regularly. It's not a show bike at all. It's I bought the bike to ride, and I ride it.
Well, it's a beautiful piece. How about performance? Performance as opposed to machines that we would run around and notice today?
Well, in terms of the actual speed and power, obviously it doesn't compare with the modern Japanese machinery.
I was afraid you were going to say that because, you know, I'm going to tell you, one of the things that happens is we look back with rose-colored glasses. I rode one of these about 35 years ago. As a matter of fact, spent a couple of days on them, and I remembered it as just an awesomely powerful machine compared to my 650 BSA and compared to some of the 45-inch flathead Harleys that I've been riding.
You really have to give Susan credit for hanging in there in costume.
Right, pretty hard to compete with those 200-mile-an-hour Japanese weapons.
That's right. The top speed of this machine was somewhere around 120 to 125 miles an hour in standard trim, and of course the brakes don't compare to a modern machine either.
One thing, let's make a point of that. Chuck, if you come down here, these are actually interesting. They had brakes done in two styles at the time. One of the styles was called full hub brakes, which means the hub went all the way across and they gave you a wider brake area and the spokes would come out of the hub. And then there was the kind that was only partial like this. This one has this partial design, but it's actually both sides. So you have actually a brake on both sides of the spokes.
That's correct, yeah.
Unusual design.
Very unusual for the time, and Vincent thought very carefully about the brakes on a powerful machine like this, and they were way ahead of the equivalent bikes of the era.
One final question, I'm going to let you get warmed up. We noticed on the first one that we looked at, I believe the engine was an aluminum color, and this one, the engine is black. Was that a representation of the Black Shadow, or was that just the way you did it?
No, it's the original color for the Black Shadow. The engine and cases were all stove enameled in black.
Okay, and the Rapide then was done in silver.
That's correct.
I have a question, Bill. Which is the biggest bike, like kind of like the Harley Davidson, where they had like the really big, like the hog, like the mean big bad bike?
Well,
bike? Which one?
Now wait a minute. Now, are you talking about in sheer physical size and weight, or are you talking about in terms of the largest engine, or
No,
what?
the biggest one in like physical, when you
Probably-
ride up to a bar and everyone's like, oh no.
Well, probably the biggest machine physically today, I would imagine, would be the six-cylinder Honda Goldwing. That
No, I
would.
mean in Vincents.
Oh no, the Vincents. This is it. You're looking
That's
at
it? Okay.
this is the Black Shadow. The only model that made more power than this from the Vincent line was the Black Lightning, which was exactly the same bike, except if I remember correctly, it had a little more radical cam timing and a little larger valves. Am I halfway right?
That's right, and different carburation too.
Yeah, little
Anal GPs.
You talk about carburetors that are evil to work with. I spent a fair amount of time trying to get GPs to work. They didn't work at all.
They're terrible.
They're absolutely awful. What size carbs does this one have?
These have got 1 1/8.
1 1/8.
Well, actually they're 28 millimeter because it's modern concentric carburetors, but they're equivalent to the original 1 1/8 inch.
Well, I'm telling you something, my friend. If you haven't lived until you've tried to get GPs to work,
right?
They were miserable. Anyhow,
I'm cold.
I know. We've got to go. Susan, once again, is cold. So, folks, thank you for sharing your machine with our audience.
You're welcome.
It's absolutely a beautiful, beautiful piece, folks. We've got another one, so don't go away.
Everyone was freezing, but the weather looked like it was about to get really bad, so Bill persuaded Paul to come out once again.
Well, for our last Vincent of the day, we've got the first person we talked to back again, and I dragged them out of a warm place, but hopefully you're all warmed up again.
I'm one side.
One side. Please once again reintroduce yourself to the audience for those who didn't see the earlier part of the show.
Paul Holsworth.
From?
Palatine, Illinois.
Okay, and apparently he has a Black Shadow, am I correct?
It's a Black Shadow.
Okay, tell us the year.
It's a blend. It's part 51, part 53.
Okay, explain.
Most of the bike is a 51. The rear frame member is off of a 53 Rapide.
Because it was probably crashed.
Well, it was probably owned by a guy that a lot of people that own Vincents own more than one, and they take them apart and they put them back together. In fact, that's really why I ended up with this bike. I had to stand in line to buy it. The guy ahead of me wanted a bike where all the numbers matched from original manufacturer, and the numbers on the rear frame member didn't match the numbers for the Black Shadow when it was made. So he said, I won't buy it. And I said, thank you very much. I'll buy it. Because going down the road, I don't feel those numbers at all.
Because you actually use the machine.
I like to drive.
Boy, I'm telling you something. One of the things I want to point out, by the way, the reason that I am so enamored with the Vincents was because these were true high-performance motorcycles. I want to just point out to the audience, if you notice the carburetor and the almost direct angle into the intake manifold through the cylinder head, this creates just excellent breathing. And on the opposite side, it has just as nice of a carburetor arrangement going into the cylinder head also for excellent breathing. These were very powerful motorcycles.
Well, for their day, they were powerful. They're also geared tall. They were really made as a sport touring bike, where in the continent you could do 80, 90 miles an hour without worry about being stopped for speeding.
Well, one other thing I want to mention too is you have to take everything in the context of the times. This is a 1000cc, and Chuck, if you would, show the audience the machine again. This is a 1000cc V-twin, and this was at a time when the biggest thing out of Britain were 650 vertical twins, and not that many of them, and the Harley-Davidsons were 45-inch flathead engines, so this was actually a significantly larger engine pretty much than anything else that was around.
Right, well, they were really looking to emulate, to some extent, Bruff's Superior. Because Bruff was making a 1000cc, 1100cc touring bike, but it was a really high-end bike. I think they only made about 3,500 Bruffs in the time they were in business. So Phil Vincent and Phil Irving were looking for a bike that would tour at a high speed, and they were really motorcyclists as people. It's an interesting story. Phil Irving fell into the Vincent company. Early on, Phil Vincent knew the value of publicity, so he hired a guy to drive around the world on a sidecar outfit. It was a one-cylinder, 600cc side valve motor. The passenger bailed out in Australia because he decided he'd had enough of that. And Phil Irving said, fresh out of engineering school and a kind of a motorcycle fanatic, he says, that looks like good work if you can get it. And he took the job. They finished the ride around the world, ended up in England, went to work for Phil Vincent at the factory as chief designer.
Amazing. You're so familiar with the Vincent story. You are a fan.
Well, you know, it's a motorcyclist. If you look at the bike, this is the D conversion.
Show the audience how this works. This is pretty interesting. Now, wait a minute. You're blocking the shot. They're not going to be able to see that. What we've got here, first of all, so the audience can see. Chuck, give me just a second to come in on this. We've got a handle here, and notice how it operates the center stand. And if you would, without blocking the shot, if you can, go ahead and operate that for the audience. Actually, pretty intriguing way to do it.
Very interesting. Kickstands on either side. If the kickstands, if you pull a bolt, they'll drop down, and you now have a center stand to get the front wheel off the ground. If you move to the back here,
step right over here. Go ahead.
There's also a rear prop stand, again, to get the rear wheel off the ground.
Wait a minute, so the audience can see this. Chuck, can we see that? Okay, go ahead, so you can pull the rear wheel off the ground. Clever design.
My bags are hiding it, but you can adjust the chain without tools. There's what they call a Tommy bar.
Oh, I can see it. Folks, what he's talking about here is a big, like a T-handle that's on the end of the axle. You can see it on the front, as a matter of fact. Chuck, if you come over here, there's like a T-handle on both of the axles, so you can actually remove the wheels without tools.
You can remove the wheels without tools, and you can also adjust the chain without tools. So these people were motorcyclists.
Go right ahead.
Another feature, tools. I've got a little tool tray right underneath the seat. Comes right out.
If you tilt
there's
it up.
my tools.
Really?
Now, that's the other thing of a Vincent. You need a lot of tools.
Well, most British motorcycles, yes. I'm sorry, my British friends out there.
There's a map right there too.
Well, that's kind of. As a matter of fact, this looks like an original Vincent tank cover, if I'm not mistaken.
The tank cover was made by a woman out in California, who's also a Vincent owner. It's made out of goat skin. And she makes these for the Vincent Club, also recovers the seats. I ordered this from her, could be 8 years ago. It was right during the Iran-Iraq war, and she said she had trouble getting goat skins without bullet holes in them. So I had to wait a year. Little local color.
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing that I'm reminded of as I stand here. I remember years ago when I first rode the Vincent, and this was probably 35 years ago, I couldn't help but be impressed by the awesome speedometer. 150 mile an hour speedometer.
150 mile an hour speedometer. Now, I have not seen 150 miles an hour in this, maybe with a high fever and some good drugs, but never in situ, so to speak.
Well, I must say it took real courage for them to put a 150 mile an hour speedometer on a motorcycle in the early 50s.
Well, that's right. Well, the bike was capable of doing over 120 standard.
Susan, you had a question.
Yeah, what is this over here?
Well, that had nothing to do with Vincent's, but go ahead.
Well, that's my little route sheet. Last year I got lost in the middle of the route because we try to take back roads. We're trying to stay off the main highways, and I got lost. And it's not good if you're the leader to be lost.
Well,
so I bought a little enduro route device, and then typing up my directions here and planning the route, I knocked them down in size on my copier, and and so it's my cheat sheet, so I don't get lost.
That's clever.
Just directions. And folks, they're giving us a wrap-up sign. I see it, Chuck. I know we've got to move on. Take a little broader shot here. She's cold again. I want the audience to see this great motorcycle one more time.
Wonderful, rare, classic, antique high-performance motorcycles from another era, and we just stumbled across them. Now, with the weather closing in, it was time to wrap things up because these guys had to leave and continue their run.
It's hard to believe that Bill just stumbled on this great program, but that's what happened.
Said that the Vincent Group is a bunch of snobs. Look at the other machines that they've got riding with them today. These guys are willing to tolerate all kinds of brands, including a side shift, meaning a tank shift. This is the way this Harley is shifted on the tank. Very old machine. Also riding with the Vincent Group, and you are?
Joe Cavallini.
From?
Mount Prospect, Illinois.
Tell us about your scooter.
It's a 60 panhead. It's a basic FLH, tank shift, foot clutch.
And the Vincent guys probably let you ride with them because it is a tank shift.
They put up with me for some reason. I haven't figured out what it is yet, yeah.
Well, as I understand it, because it's a tank shift, they tolerate it.
That could be. Yeah, that could be.
Okay, you having fun today, though?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, even with all this terrible weather?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, here's a real biker. Don't run away, please. Come on down here.
Hey, is that a boat on the launch ramp?
We've got a Norton, and you are?
Dave Wagner from Rosemont.
Tell us about your bike.
It's a 1964 Norton Scrambler. It's a 750, and it's pretty much in original condition.
Now, wait a minute, is this a P11?
Yes. It's made for the dirt in the street.
Right, but the P11 had high pipes.
Yeah, this thing has been modified a little bit. It's got aftermarket mufflers on it and stuff like that.
Okay, and once again, I got to ask you the same question. Apparently the Vincent guys tolerate you?
Oh, yes, definitely, because I drink with them.
Okay, he's the one that bought the last round. Don't run away, please. Let me come down here because we've got a real modern motorcycle here. This is a KTM big single, and you are?
My name's Joe Block.
Where are you from, Joe?
I live in Evanston.
Tell us about your bike.
This is a KTM Duke, basically an enduro or a dirt bike that's been modified for the street. In Europe, they call these super motorrods, and they're a very high-performance single-cylinder motorcycle.
How big of an engine?
It's a 610 cc.
How's the performance on it?
Performance is fantastic. The bike only weighs about 325 pounds, and it has extremely high-quality components, so it wheelies, and it stoppies, and it handles like a rail on a rail.
Well, you sound enthused.
It's a great bike, it really is.
And once again, if you're getting the idea, in order to qualify to ride with the Vincent Club, you have to have kind of a quirky bike, and I hope you guys will forgive me if I identify your bikes as kind of quirky.
Oh no, that's fine, although I do happen to have a Vincent.
You have one of those too?
I do.
How many Vincents are there in the Chicago area? I can't believe this.
There's probably, I would imagine, about 30 to 40 in the Chicago area would be my guess. And in fact, Neil over there on that Comet's got a bike that I used to own.
Well, I am absolutely amazed, and we are going to show you the bike he's talking about in a moment because it just pulled in, and it is a very, very rare 500cc single-cylinder Vincent, and I've never seen one of those. So we're going to get to that in a second. Let me come over here because, of course, if you've got a gathering of British motorcycles, and most of these are British, you've got to have a Triumph, and you are.
I am Fran Cokes from Chicago, Illinois, and I have a Triumph Daytona. It's a 500cc twin, and it was named after the Daytona 200 race that it had won a couple of years.
Yes, as a matter of fact, at that time the overhead valve twin-cylinder engines were limited to 500 cc's, and of course the Triumph 500 Daytona was a very effective motorcycle in that race.
Yes, it was, and it's a standard motorcycle used for almost any kind of competition, flat track, hill climb. It's a very popular motorcycle.
Most people would know it as the Fonzie bike.
That's true. Also, Steve McQueen rode one in The Great Escape, and it was also popularized by another actor.
Marlon Brando actually.
Wait a minute, we got more comments. We got a historian here.
Well, actually, in the wild one, Marlon Brando rode a Triumph twin. Not strictly a Bonneville, but it was a Triumph twin.
I can tell you the most effective use of this engine, in my opinion, was the great Rickman Matisse machines. Do you remember those?
Oh yes, very, very classy machine, very light alloy frame, made the bike handle really well.
Yes, it was a Rickman frame out of the Rickman Brothers out of England. Thanks for spending time with us. Another great motorcycle. These guys, just so you see, if you're a real biker, you don't let the weather deter you. Step forward here just a little bit, please. And I want you to see that they actually tolerate even real Harleys that don't have side shifts. And you are?
Ron Hilber from Mount Prospect, Illinois.
Tell us about your bike.
It's a 71 Sportster stock.
Okay, and what brings you out on a terrible day like this?
Just going out for a ride, so.
Go for a ride with friends?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, please don't run away. Susan, I promise, I'm hurrying.
The guys gave me their jacket.
One of the guys
care about me, not like you.
No, all I care about is the program, as you know. I want to finish this thing up because we've got one more great Vincent that just pulled in. This poor fella has no idea what we're doing here today. If you would step over here just a little bit right about here, and you are?
Neil Donovan.
Neil, where are you from?
Chicago.
Tell us about your bike.
Actually, it's my wife's bike.
This is your wife's bike? Come on.
Mine's broken.
She has better sense than to go out riding on a day like today.
It's absolutely right.
Tell us about this one.
It's a 1951. It's a Vincent Comet. It's a 500 single. It's essentially the same thing as the twin, except they left the rear cylinder off.
I was going to say, if you can you walk around this way, just roll it forward for our camera so our camera can see it a little bit. Just roll the whole bike forward if you would, please. If you would, just bring it right out here. I want the audience to get a little closer look at this. This is actually sort of a clever piece of engineering in that he's exactly correct. They literally just cut off the rear cylinder of the machine. Am I right?
That's right.
And it ended up being a 500 single.
That's right.
Well, folks, I'm going to tell you something. We have had what a wonderful opportunity that we've had here today to take a look at these classic Vincent motorcycles on a day we thought we wouldn't find anything to shoot. It's been great fun, and we want to thank all of these guys.
Bill wrapped things up quickly because the rain really started to come down. After about 15 minutes, they realized that one lonely boater had just come in from the river, and they wanted to talk to him.
Well, it is always an adventure on Motorsports Unlimited, but talk about an adventure. Look what we've got here. Chuck, broaden your shot. We have got a real live boater here today on the Fox River, and you are?
Matt Marceau.
Matt, I noticed in your rear window you've got a WERA sticker. For the uninformed, WERA is Western Eastern Road Racing Association. That's a motorcycle road racing group. And the rest of the van, if you want to call it that, or vehicle pickup with a cap on it, is covered with fishing stickers. What are you, a motorsport fan or a fisherman?
Both.
No, you can't be both. In motorsports, you got to be only motorsports. That was the wrong answer. Now try again.
Motorsports.
There you go. Now you can tell he's a motorsport guy. Look at the awesome power plant he's got here. Chuck, I don't know, is that visible in the camera shot? Can you see it? I mean, we're talking about some smoke there, and as always on Motorsports Unlimited, we've got to find out first about your equipment. First, tell us about the boat, and then tell me about the cooking motor.
This is a 1962 Starcraft with the 1967 6-horse Evinrude on it.
He went so quick past that Starcraft, he's trying to conceal information. He doesn't want you to know that this is an entirely aluminum boat to save weight. This baby will cook with those horses, right?
Maybe 5 miles an hour with one person in the boat.
Where are you from, by the way?
Cary, Illinois.
You're right from out this way. One of the things I want to say is that you're obviously a fisherman. I can tell you can't see in the boat from where you're at, but I can tell you the boat is absolutely loaded with fishing poles and tackle boxes and all of that kind of stuff. Apparently, when you're involved in this part of your life, it's strictly for fishing.
Right.
This is not the motorsport part of your life.
No. Actually, I am a true motorcycle enthusiast. That's why I do have the racing stickers on my truck. I do a little bit of road racing on the side, just for fun.
Can you believe all those Vincents that showed up today?
Unbelievable.
To the uninformed, our audience out there that doesn't realize how significant that is, they're not going to have an idea why I've been gushing about it all day. You know what I'm talking about.
I sure do.
I haven't seen one in 30 years. All of a sudden, 4 of them roll in here.
I wouldn't want to take mine out on a day like this if I had one.
Unbelievable, wasn't it?
That's actually why I was out fishing today instead of motorcycle riding, because of the weather.
I see. Let me see if I got this right. It's too cold, rainy, and windy to ride a motorcycle, so he takes his boat out.
That's right.
Well, I'll tell you what, talk about a never say die attitude. This is your first time on the Fox River?
Yes, sir.
What provoked you to come up here today?
I had bought some new equipment recently, and I just wanted to test it out, basically, and get ready for the season coming up.
Okay, when we say equipment, he's talking about this hot little 6-horsepower Evinrude, right?
Some fishing poles, reels, some new baits, that type of thing.
We're just having a good time with him here today. Was it even navigable out there? I just learned, as a matter of fact, please come on in here. I just learned something that I think our audience ought to know about. Please step right on in here. We've got a fellow that works here, right over here. We've got a fellow that works here that apparently is a boat mechanic, and you are?
Todd Cherniak.
Where are you from, Todd?
Algonquin.
Okay, he was just telling me something very interesting that I did not know. When the river is high like this, and Chuck, if you would, show the audience the river. It is pretty high. Normally you can see a lot more of the boat ramp. It is high. When the river is high like this, apparently it goes into the whole river then is no wake. Am I correct?
Right, all the way from the McHenry Dam down to Algonquin.
Okay, now that's something, and I am a boater, and I go boating all the time, and I am familiar with Chicago television and everything. Nobody has mentioned any of that, and you say it's a $150 fine if you violate.
If they are caught going over a no wake speed, it is a $150 fine.
Boy, that's something that ought to be publicized better, because if I had come here today and put in, I could have easily been busted because it's not posted that I know of or anything.
No, it's not.
No,
That would have been fun to watch, Bill.
No, that wouldn't have been any fun to watch at all. This is one of the fellas that we had hoped we were going to talk to on today's program. When I came here, I said, do you have anything interesting from a boating standpoint that we can put on the air today? And as it turns out, it's so cold, so wet, so rainy, no one except our friend here has shown up with a boat today.
That's a new boater for you.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Now is boating new to you, or it's just new the river is new to you?
Boating's kind of new to me. I took it up about 2 years ago.
Are you enjoying it?
Yes.
Okay, on Motorsports Unlimited, I preach motorsports all the time, and yes, we will include this 6 horsepower, all aluminum little baby. We will include that as motorsports. We've got something for everybody: bikes, snowmobiles, motorcycles. As a matter of fact, I saw in the back there, I was going to do a piece with it, and we got all enchanted with those Vincents. You've got 2 snowmobiles sitting next to a boat. It looks like this is the season to make the changeover.
Yeah, we do a lot of complete automotive, or not automotive repair. We do a little automotive. We do boats, watercrafts, jet skis.
So it's time to put the snowmobiles away and get the boats ready.
Yes, it is.
Well, I'm going to tell you, and one of the our objective today, I know, Chuck, you're wrapping me up, I know. Our objective here today, it didn't turn out at all, folks, but I'm delighted with the way the show came out today. But our objective here today was that I wanted to give people a comparison between inboard boats, IOs, outboards, and jet drives, the advantages, disadvantages, and all that. We don't have time to go into it. We're going to do it another time. Quickly, which one do you like better of the 4 choices?
They're all the same.
What do you mean they're all the same? They all have different characteristics?
They're all fast.
Well, they're all fast.
Yeah, the best one is inboard.
You like the inboard?
IO, right.
IO or inboard?
IO.
You like the IOs best?
Right.
Okay. We're going to get into this whole thing one of these days. We've got to wrap it up. Chuck, pull your camera shot back a little bit. I want to show once more this brave, and once again, tell them who you are.
Matt Merso.
Matt Merso, the only guy out on the Fox River today. And how long were you out for?
About 2 hours.
Here's a guy with real heart.
We really want to get you revved up for the boating season, so let's end with boating excitement.
Run out of time, let's take a moment to acknowledge the help of those who work to digitize and save this classic episode of Motorsports Unlimited. May Chin, Art Lauschat, Samantha Bentley, and me. I'm Janine Lauschat.
Everybody loves boating and the season is here, so get your stuff ready and hit the water. Unfortunately, as always, we're out of time too soon, with only enough left to acknowledge the fine work of our award-winning production team, including Chuck Itzenthaler, John Papke, Sue Casanda, and Tom McGrady. Special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryant. Music is created for us by Fireside Recording Studio in Westchester, Illinois, and by independent artists Roger Pauly and Jerry Herbert. Of course, we have to take a moment to thank the stars of this edition of Motorsports Unlimited: Susan Russell, Jackie Sawalish, Robin Hole, Bobby Sloan, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Perry Williams. Kind of glad the weather kept the boats from coming out. The Vincents were magnificent and a rare treat to present. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
This program made possible in part by support from the Chicagoland Toys for Tots Motorcycle Parade held on Western Avenue in Chicago, the first Sunday in December.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
This program made possible in part by support from Copy That, located in the County Farm Plaza at County Farm Road and Army Trail Road in Carroll Stream, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from PB Food Products, located on 47th Street at Western Avenue in Chicago, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney & Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grant Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
Next week on Motorsports Unlimited, it's time for a break from winter. We know, snowmobiling is cool, motorcycle ice racing is cool, let's not forget ATV racing, and how about the very elaborate indoor winter car shows at McCormick Place in the Rosemont Convention Center. There is plenty of motorsport fun in the winter, and we want you to take full advantage of all of it, but we also want you to remember what's just around the corner, all next week on Motorsports Unlimited.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye, and keep on rocking.